So welcome, 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 Tara. We so appreciate your remarkable leadership and solidarity. And as always at Setsi, we begin all things by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Tara, could you please share a little bit about your remarkable work with our listeners and our viewers?
Absolutely, can do. And just like to acknowledge that I'm joining from Wurundjeri country over here in Australia, traditional owners of the lands where I'm on today. So I am the CEO at Social Traders, and we are an organisation that exists to build a thriving social enterprise sector. And we do that in a few different ways. We are the certifier of social enterprises in Australia, and that gives them the stamp of credibility to know that they are a legitimate social enterprise business. We work with business and governments to encourage them to buy from social enterprises. So that means that there's revenue, sustainable revenue flowing into the social enterprise sector. And we work with governments around policy to try and create social procurement policy that preferences social enterprises in the buying decisions of business and government, so that we have that policy setting that enables more money to flow to social enterprises over time. So that's the focus of our work, and we work with hundreds of social enterprises here in Australia. There are 600 that are certified. We work with 160 business and governments over here. We've got 4 state governments involved and some of the biggest companies in Australia and also globally that are working with us to buy from social enterprises. And ultimately, the reason that all that matters is we're building a fairer and more equitable Australia and world by enabling social enterprises to do what they do, supporting the most marginalised groups in our society, supporting vulnerable people, creating community and environmental outcomes.
That's absolutely incredible. Congrats. That's hard and daunting work to do multi-stakeholder engagement, government relations, public affairs, and direct service delivery to that amount of social enterprise. I know in Canada, our colleague David LePage from Bisocial Canada has been doing work similar for so long. Our colleague, our Indigenous beloved brother, Shannon from NACA. And I remember how long it took just to change simple policy from cheapest price to best value. So definitely.
Right.
I really applaud your leadership and all the work that you're doing and all the folks that you're supporting. And it's a perfect segue to my next question. What's inspiring you right now in your work? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at nights?
Different answers to all things, I think. I mean, what inspires me is it's the impact that gets created at the end of the day. It's when you go out and you visit a social enterprise and you talk to the people that they're supporting, whether they're migrants and refugees or marginalised youth or people with disabilities or just anyone that's finding it really hard for reasons outside of their control to empower themselves and to build sustainable livelihoods. And when you go out and talk to them and hear that through a social enterprise, they've had a chance that they wouldn't have otherwise had to better their own circumstances, whether that's through a job, whether that's through support. It's just amazing to hear that transformation that happens. And that connects us back to why we do what we do. It's about people. And it's about building a fairer world, for everyone, so that there's that equality that exists across our society, which unfortunately is so lacking at the moment. So that's the inspiring part of what we do. And then the bit that keeps me up at night is I'm impatient for change, and the pace of change is slow sometimes, like you were just saying, particularly when we're talking about changing government policies, changing the way businesses act and think in terms of how they buy products and services, but also some of the impacts that they can create themselves, what they can learn from social enterprises. There's just the scope of change is enormous. The opportunity is huge, and grappling with that at the pace that it's working at the moment. Sometimes you just want to press fast forward so that we can actually speed things up a little bit, because there's no shortage of intention and goodwill out there. And there's a big question from many people about how they do this work and how they get engaged with it. But often it's very, very slow, and particularly when we're dealing with big business and trying to help them think about how they engage with social enterprise, it takes one person, to become a champion in the business and then build it out from there. But that it takes lots of conversations, lots of influencing. And so that's the impatience, I guess, is what gets me.
I couldn't agree more. Sometimes I say when it comes to systems change work, we need to have almost like a macro type of patience, but like a micro urgency, like the day in, day out, because systemic transformation sometimes is so incremental. Once again, I couldn't agree more. I'm impatient around a lot of things when it comes to social innovation, social impact work, especially when navigating multiple bureaucracies and stakeholders and ecosystems. that's all seem to want change, but don't know how to make it happen, you know, in a way that makes sense,
Right.
operate at the pace of community. So perfect segue to my next question. What challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
Yeah, and it's interesting how they shift over time too. So one of the main ones is awareness and understanding, first of all, amongst business and government in particular, about what social enterprise is, how social change works, what social innovation is, you know, and what they can do in this space. So it's a huge challenge, and we're a relatively small organisation. So there's 35 of us. You know, we're based across 4 states in Australia, and we work across the whole country. You know, but that's a small team to be trying to shift the way the entire economy works in Australia, and all of the businesses within that, from the big ones to the small ones, as well as all the government. It's a lot to do and get done. So the scope of building that awareness and then trying to manage where we put our attention and energy at any one time, because we can't do it all, of course. So picking sectors that we can work with, individuals that we can work with, organisations we can work with, to slowly build out change and create those ripples. Over time, that's a big challenge of where we put our focus, how we prioritise. But the lovely thing we're seeing in Australia now with government and with business is the conversations shifting from what is a social enterprise, what is this, to how do we do it? So it's no longer why should we, it's more a how do we question, which is really lovely to see. But again, you know, it just takes time then to getting into the how it's done with individual organisations. It's a one-on-one approach often, and you need to go and sit with them and talk to them and help people understand how this works and give them connections and ideas and training and support to help think about doing things in a way they've never done before. And so that just takes, again, the time and the prioritizing where we put our energy in doing that work, and how we partner with others, because we absolutely acknowledge we can't do this on our own. And we talk a lot about having a heart set of collaboration at Social Traders, where we know we need to work with all of the other players across the social economy, not just the social enterprise ecosystem, but others, you know, around B Corps and cooperatives and other social impact models that are all doing amazing work. And we need to join up and work together so that we can collectively create this change, because it's only by doing that that we're going to create the scale of impact that's possible and achievable and within reach. But we just need to come together to do that.
I couldn't agree more. Unity and collective impact is the only way to make lasting, sustainable change. But most importantly, when you talk about technical assistance and capacity strengthening opportunities, I think that's the how. Like, when folks understand the how and the what, they'll more understand the why it's needed. But I think it's remarkable that you've been able to make such strides, because there are regions and jurisdictions that are still a lot I'm not as far on the continuum as your organization has pressed stakeholders. So once again, congratulations on some remarkable and visionary leadership. So my next question, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work?
Yeah, the main one is growth. So over the last 6 years, we've seen $843 million Australian dollars spent with certified social enterprises, which is fantastic. And we're seeing continued growth in the number of social enterprises certifying and business and governments that are buying from them. But we have a big vision out to 2030. We want that 843 million to be 5.5 billion by 2030, within the next 5 years. So we have a huge growth trajectory to get there. So the big priority is, again, that awareness raising, bringing more people into the tent, more social enterprises to certify so they can be part of this marketplace, more business and governments to come on board with us so they can learn how to do this work, start doing more of it, and then being able to create that ripple effect, create that momentum, so that ultimately we want this just to be the way business is done. So we don't want social procurement to be a thing. We want it to just be procurement, just to be how business buys things in future. We want social enterprise ultimately to be business as usual. You know, it's just part of the economy. And so in some future world, however long it takes us to get there, whether it's in our lifetimes or beyond that, that social enterprise is just business. We don't need that term anymore, because every business in the economy is existing to create positive social impact. And that's just how we run our markets. That would be an amazing long-term outcome.
Indeed, I couldn't agree more. And I think, once again, There's such alignment in terms of just what social purpose and social impact should look like in the future. So another perfect segue. What is your ultimate goal and what does success look like to you and your colleagues? I think you just said it, but I'd love to see if there's any more to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately it, is that we'd like to, every for-purpose organization should ultimately be working to make ourselves redundant. So we would love to see a world where we're not needed anymore, because business operates in a social enterprise model just as the way that it does, that it practices its business. And those businesses are buying from each other, so they're supporting each other's revenue streams, they're helping themselves and each other to be more sustainable, so that we have this reinforcing ecosystem. And within the current economy, within the market economy, we're using that then to build social impact and create social impact through everything that we do. So we're helping to build a fairer and more sustainable world. So ultimately, we'd love to see it catch on to be business as usual, so that it's just how business gets done.
Indeed. Well, that's the type of society and future I'd love my children and grandchildren to live in. So I think we're in complete alignment around that. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
I think there's lots that we can each do. We all have circles of influence, and that's one of our biggest challenges, as I've outlined, is this awareness raising, education, understanding, and building engagement around the possibilities around social enterprise, around social impact, around for-purpose models. We all know people who know people who know people. And if we are active in sharing and spreading that message, those are the ripples. And then those ripples start to bump into each other. And then the ripples start to become waves. And then, ultimately, we need a tidal wave of this. So it just sweeps over the whole economy, so that ultimately everyone starts to be aware of this and operating in this way. So we're all individually powerful just by conversations that we have. And then within our own context, wherever they may be, the businesses that we work within, the organizations that we work within, we can then influence within those spaces as well, to be either buying from social enterprises, or looking at how we collaborate with others in the for-purpose economy, or helping our colleagues to understand and have more and deeper conversations about what does it look like to change the way that we do business in the businesses that we operate in. How might we, is one of our favorite questions. How might we think about this from a different perspective? What could it look like if we did something in a slightly different way? And people need those thought starters. So for all of those people that are out there in the for-purpose world, we've all got the thought starters. So let's make sure we plant those seeds, don't keep them to ourselves, and encourage and educate to bring other people on the journey with us, because we're all individually powerful.
Ashe, ashe, ashe. I couldn't agree more. And I love the how might we? We always say what needs to be true for this. So I think there's a lot of alignments around that as well. How might we manifest or actualize a future where all business is a social impact, mission-driven, social innovation business or framework? I think that's absolutely remarkable. And once again, I just applaud your leadership, your candor, authenticity, and the clear solidarity that you bring to this work. And as always at Setsi, we close this conversation the way we began, by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders, including stalwarts, whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Tara, thank you so much for your leadership and all that you do for so many.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.